Hello, I'm Doug Smith. This is the February 2014 edition of Portsmouth This Week, which also happens to be Valentine's Day.
That's great.
And our special guest on Valentine's Day of 2014 is Tina Dolan of the Aquidneck Island Planning Commission. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you, Doug. Happy to be here, especially today. It's a nice day.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, I have to do this is from the crew of Portsmouth This Week. I'd just like to give you something to make you our Valentine.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you gave it to me ahead of time rather than at the end. So, if in case you didn't like the show.
Well, or in case we went over, which we usually do.
I'm just joking, but sure. Thank you.
The Aquidneck Island Planning Commission. Can you explain a little bit about how it came about, what you guys do for the communities? I know you do a lot, and we'll talk about some of the projects specifically, but could you just give us some background?
Sure. It was formed in 1985, and it was formed because the planners from each of the communities were working on projects that spanned their communities, that spanned the island, and they felt that they could get more long-term benefits for the island by working together. So a multi-municipal agency was formed by state statute, and the communities endorsed it. And so since then, we've been working. They began to have full-time staff in 2000, and I was hired in 2004. Now, how we work is with the three communities, we select projects and we work collaboratively toward them, but what we try to do is find solutions for the problems, whether it's water quality, transportation, solid waste. We did a study on LNG. We're very flexible, so we can go in any direction. If we don't have the answers, we hire consultants. We are funded through $54,000 by the communities combined, and then we raise the remainder of the money through charitable state and federal grants, and to date, we've raised over $3 million, wow, which we then return to the communities in services.
Okay, now, let me segue to you. Mm-hmm. You've got quite an impressive background. I'll talk about your great new website in a few minutes, but can you give us some of your background and how that might have prepared you for this job?
Well, I'm very fortunate in that when I left graduate school, I was hired by a YWCA in the Midwest to become their community services director. And I truly have to say that I didn't plan to have a career in nonprofit development, but that job was so great. I went on to become the Chamber of Commerce Executive Director, and then I became an administrator for the school committee, central office administrator in the town of Falmouth. I then moved to the Land Trust, which is one of my favorite jobs in Falmouth, where I became instrumental. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but we worked together to save over 1,000 acres. And then I was elected county commissioner on Cape Cod, which was a wonderful opportunity to work.
That was in Barnstable, right?
Yes, we were housed in Barnstable. We represented all 15 towns. And that gave me a very good background to work here because I worked with the Cape Cod Commission and with the 15 towns. So it set the groundwork for working collaboratively.
I know this is your 10th year here.
Yes, it is.
So you're really a long-term, you're almost an island resident.
Well, I just love it. I really do. It affords a lot of flexibility and differences in the projects we work on, and wonderful people.
Well, I hope people will go to your website, and we'll give you the website address at some point here, but it explains a lot about what you do in your projects. What we might want to talk about are the projects you have going on, things that are coming up fairly recently or right now. I know the Bikeway project is dear to your heart. You want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Well, this project grew out of our Aquidneck Island transportation study, and that was a multimodal study that involved the entire island, a lot of public involvement, and we looked at the Shoreline Bikeway, which was laid out in the West Side Master Plan. It was a rail with trail along the entire island, and it cost $26 million and would take 5 to 10 years to complete. So we thought in that plan, well, what can we do for now? You know, I won't be able to, wait that long to bike again. So we put together this interim plan that actually uses the roadways. So the Rhode Island Department of Transportation is doing probably 85% of the work through striping. It's not a family-centered trail. It is, as I said, it's on the road. It's 1.2 miles off-road. But it will get people from the Sakana Bridge down to Newport, over the Mount Hope to 55 miles of dedicated pathways, and then over the Sakana to other pathways on that side of the water. So it has wonderful opportunities because biking is one of the fastest growing sports in the country.
And it seems like being bike-friendly is very important. I know a big stretch of this road is along the Burma Road, which I take as I go to the base every once in a while. And it's, like you say, it's just striping. The road hasn't changed. It's just they have carved out a 6-foot space or whatever it is on the sides for bikes. It's not for kids because people are zooming by at 35 miles an hour.
Right,
but,
it's not.
But it certainly can get them down there, yeah.
Now, if I may say that we're doing a design review study right now, and that is funded by the Van Buren Charitable Foundation, and it's a requirement before we possibly can get to the state for federal and state funding to create the rest of it. And so that's focused only on Portsmouth, because in Portsmouth there's a 1.2-mile path that is designed conceptually along the water from Corey's Lane down to Stringham, and that would be a rail with trail. And the reason for that is the heavily congested West Main Road. We want to have an alternative to that.
Bob, can we get that on the a picture of the? There it is.
Yes, if you see Corey's, it comes down to Stringham.
Yep.
There you go. And so, we're creating a very intensive public participation in the town of Portsmouth. Any decisions will be made by the town council. Won't be made by us. We have absolutely no implementing power. We're simply a facilitator. And we'll have public meetings, we'll have site walks with the abutters, hearings with the town council, and then hearings with the Rhode Island Department of Transportation.
Okay, now I know there's a bike path across the new bridge.
Yes.
What about the Mount Hope Bridge? Can you actually go over that on a bike?
Well, it's open to bicyclists.
The roads are.
Yes, the roads are. It's not the easiest thing to do, but if you have more than one biker, you can do what's called take the road and take the lane, and the cars behind have to, wait as you go across.
Preferably not, but that's what happens when you're trying to get across there in a hurry.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah,
The sidewalk is kind of
It looks like it'd be a
narrow.
great place because I know the East Bay bike path goes right through Bristol, and it's
Yeah.
so you can almost connect to the whole state pretty soon.
You
by
can.
bike.
That's why I say 55 miles. It's going to go up to Worcester.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we have a picture now showing the connection over the Secundit River Bridge, and so that would go essentially down Anthony Road.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the other road that might need improvement in addition to the, building the rail with trail. And that might need resurfacing. It's a little bit rough. I've ridden it.
Yeah.
And I should say, go back to the rail with trail in the study, we're not just looking at that rail with trail on the water. We're looking at alternative paths. In any good study, you weigh alternatives. And we'll pick the one, we'll recommend the one that is most practical and does not have any environmental impact.
And so the actual decision becomes the one of the town that the project is in then. So this goes back to our town council ultimately for their decision to go forward with it.
Yes, and then it would move up to the state for the tip. You've heard of the tip.
Gee, this is really good stuff, and I'm sure everybody would be interested in seeing how it works out. Is there anything that people can do to support you guys?
Well, they certainly can send some letters to the town council, and they can come out for the public meetings, or they can send us letters. We'd really like to hear from people because, sometimes you only hear from a very small contingent, and I think a broader response is much more
and
indicative.
they can contact you by email through your website, I presume.
That's right.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this is interesting, and it brings up probably the next project, or one you've been working on for a while, and that's the transportation study and implementing some of the results that have come out of this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. As I said, that's a multimodal study, and it was funded by Rhode Island Department of Transportation, statewide planning, and the Federal Highway. And they dedicated $500,000 for the study, and we managed it. Had wonderful consultants, and brought in, we had comments from about 3,000 people to help guide us, and we had many public meetings in which it was very interactive. And we looked at, bus, car, train, pedestrian, and bicycle. And some of what we're working on now, we've had another grant from Van Buren Charitable Foundation and the Rhode Island Foundation that we're still playing out, and that was to create a technical committee, similar to what we had for the transportation study, to follow and track and make sure that it's implemented because as we all know, I mean, a study is great, but it has to be implemented.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
It is.
When it comes to funding for the actual
It
project.
is. But we're so lucky because our technical committee consists of the decision makers at RIDOT, at RIPTA, at FHWA, and our consultants also serve as the consultants to the state. So.
Yeah, it just seems, you know, it's interesting because I learned a lot about Portsmouth history and island history last year. And we've got two main roads. They've been there forever, it seems like. We've always had two main roads. And they're narrow, they're kind of constricted by telephone poles on both sides.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to figure out how you could make this, you know, into a modern transportation system. Does rail, as you say, rail plays at least a conceptual part of this.
Right.
What it would take, of course, is another light rail thing across the Secundit River Bridge, I guess.
Right. That's an expensive and long-term solution, but it would be a good solution in the long term as we have to cut down on greenhouse gases and worry about how we get around and less reliance on the automobile. We did a lot of traffic counts on East and West Main Road to see what we could do. And there were several designs that used 2 lanes, went down to 2 lanes, and had bicycle lanes on the sides. But in order to support that, we had to go over and put on 4 lanes at Burma Road. And that was very controversial. You know, that's a lovely seaside road, and to have 4 lanes, you know, cracking up and down there is not necessarily the best use for that road. So we also had that plan for West Main, a possible, you know, 2-lane with the bikeways. So we abandoned it, and right now, you know, we have to stick with what we have. But, you know, moving those poles, very expensive. Have to do land takings as well.
Exactly, and
yeah.
it just, this is one of the problems when you come from a community that's got a really old infrastructure that you keep trying to tweak.
Exactly. Now, on Bristol Ferry Road, the state has recommended, they have done quite a substantial study on safety on that road, and they found, you know, 75 incidents of crashes in the last, like, 4 or 5
I
years.
live down there right off the road,
Do
so
you?
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay, that's right. And then 2 fatalities in the last few years. And they have a group known as the State Highway Safety Board. And after the state looked at it very carefully, they turned over the data to this board, and the board recommended, for safety purposes, to bring that down to 2 lanes and a center turning lane.
Yeah, they've done that on part of
Yeah.
West Main Road. I'm not sure what the name of the street is. And it actually it doesn't seem that bad because it's got turning lanes. So,
Exactly.
you know, somebody will get in the middle lane to turn left, and you can keep going by.
That's right, and there are so many curb cuts on Bristol Ferry, more than many other roads on the island. So
Yeah.
that's why they have the center turning
Yeah,
lane.
I think a big part of the real problem, as I see it anyway, from my personal experience, is just people on cell phones. They slow down. They don't realize that traffic's behind them, you know. And but anyway, it's just called paying attention, I guess.
I know, it's so important. And another myth for that Bristol Ferry redesign is that it will back up traffic along Bristol Ferry if the tolls are installed on the Secundit Bridge. And they did studies, our consultants did and the state did, and they were way below the threshold that would create a problem on the road. Now, I'm not pushing it or not pushing it one way or the other. I'm just saying that that's another example of what the study looked at. Now, if it went in, there are 2 wider lanes created on the outside. They're not necessarily for biking. They could be sidewalks, they could be walking paths, landscaping, and the state is not even striping that outside road. So.
Okay, now how does AIPC specifically get involved in this? You kind of represent the 3 communities at meetings with these folks? Or?
Yes, we do, and as I said, the RIDOT, we work in that technical steering committee with the study ongoing implementation. Again, we provide studies and manpower and collaboration. We have no regulatory power, which is fine.
So you really don't, you're not an executive body per se where you're making decisions, you're pulling all the information together.
Yeah.
Kind of like a staffing or function for
Yeah,
for the
exactly. I
towns.
think we like to think of it as we're a resource for the communities and the state.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things you mentioned in an email to me earlier was that you've recently increased the number of board members from 6 to 13. And I'm just curious as to what does that buy you and why did you do it, and does everybody agree with this?
Well, here's the evolution of that plan. We've had 6 members, 2 from each planning board on the island, each municipality, since 1985. And with the complex issues that are facing the island today and the long-range problems that we're going to have to deal with, whether it's water, development, transportation, we felt that the 6 probably could use a lot of bolstering. And so we had a grant to focus on that. And we began with having a strategic planning session with 40 leaders from across the state who knew us and worked with us. And we met for a better part of a day to talk about what is the AIPC, what are our strengths, what are the weaknesses, how can we better meet the challenges of today, what are the challenges on the island, long-term and short-term. So out of that, the decision was, well, let's have a smaller committee work on how a new configuration of the AIPC could best meet those challenges with manpower. So this smaller advisory committee, again, is broad-based professionals, came in and worked with us. Actually, we did not even contribute to the conversation other than facilitating. So these other members came up with a plan, and their plan was to include membership to have a better reach in the community. Right now, a lot of people really are not sure of who we are or what we do. So by reaching out, we can get information back, and if we have board members, they can take information into the community so we get a better sense, what are people interested in? You know, what do they want to do on this island? So we're looking at, this advisory committee recommended engineers, planning professionals, legal field, any number, maybe nonprofit management, certainly business and finance. So they also described how they could work together. So we could have a 9-member planning committee that really just goes right out, works with the councils very closely and the planning boards to tackle some of these problems. And then a 4-member executive committee who would work on fundraising, stability, communications, staffing.
Kind of overseeing the projects and things.
Yes, but they are equal with the planning members. Yeah. They all have to vote together, equal votes.
Now these members presumably have some from each community?
Absolutely, 4 from each community, and then the Chamber of Commerce director is a standing member
Jody
of the
Sullivan.
Executive Committee, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and so it's being voted right now by the councils. We've brought the plan. Now, by state statute, the councils only determine the number of members to appoint and maybe their terms and that sort of thing. Then the AIPC would be responsible for, forming those committees, getting officers and that sort of thing. But Portsmouth right away approved the plan. Newport approved the plan. So we're waiting. Middletown we'll meet with on Monday. They've delayed the response. We saw them once. They continued it.
Okay.
So we're hoping to really let them know that their responsibility or their statutory power is to appoint, to consider going from 2 people
and there's no way
to 4
threatened
people.
by any of this. This is seems
Yeah.
like a no-brainer.
Right. It doesn't cost more. It doesn't involve any more work.
Yeah.
In fact, it allows the council member, if he or she wants, to come and serve on the committee, or their designee. So, yeah, I think it increases collaboration.
Well, that's great. I think the more we can do with that, the better. We're seeing people, because of budgets and things, look at regionalization and things. In some of these areas like schools, it gets very hard very quickly. But I think all of these other things, the roads connect, everything connects here on this. We're on an island, for crying out loud. So I think somebody like you guys provide a vital function to the community. One of the things that's always impressed me, I wouldn't say ever since I've been here, but almost, at least for the last 10 years or so, the Navy release of surplus land along the Burma Road. We've been talking about the West Side plan and things. And you folks have had a major part of this thing from the very beginning. You want to just discuss that? And then I want to just segue into the West Side Master Plan as well, which I think is a major accomplishment that you guys deserve a lot of credit for.
Well, thank you. Yes. Well, in 2005, we finished the West Side Master Plan, and that was the thrust of that was to look at the West Side, 5,000 acres, centered on the potential properties that we believed would be surplused. So the whole community worked on that, and we had recommendations. And then we had to wait a bit for the Navy to actually make that decision. Then there was a delay as they considered other parties that might be possible contenders for that land, and it turned out that the island would be. Now, during that time, AIPC, because of its relationship with the communities, formed a rough coalition of the communities to focus on how this would work in the future. And we brought some people from the Department of Defense who would be funding the process in the future to meet with us and talk about how it would work and how it worked in other communities. And in order to, for the Navy to work with us, the island had to form a local redevelopment authority. And that authority is comprised of representation, equal representation from the three communities. So we continued to work on that, and then in that process I applied for a Hassenfeld Family Foundation fellowship to bring the stakeholders to Harvard for a collaborative class, a week-long class at that time. So we brought the Navy captain, we brought the attorney from the Navy, we brought some of the administrators, we brought a fellow from statewide planning, and so a planner from the island. So that was wonderful, because when you go to the Kennedy School, you live there, and you're just with each other every day, all the time. So you really get to know the person. And my belief is, you're not so much agreeing on the parameters of a project. You're first getting to know the person. So you can say, well, my kid takes softball and whatever, and swimming, and so that lays the foundation, which we did. And then we went to Harvard again, which is another matter. We went to Harvard last fall. So we got it set up, and then once the properties were actually surplused, we helped the communities form their formal entity, the Aquidneck Island Reuse Planning Committee. And then we used the money, I wrote the grant for that, and then we used that money to hire a facilitator. And so she worked with them for the whole year, determining plans in a public process. And then this past year, they also worked on a much more finite description of what the plans should be, the three communities. And they had a wonderful consultant, nationally known. And so each of the towns have really basically come away with either a final plan, or they have so much information from the consultant, so much data, that they will be able to tweak that plan as they would like. And I did work with them this year as the property reuse coordinator.
Well, I understand that West Side Master Plan, that event that came out of this, was awarded, this is a great plan, kind of an example of how a plan should be. What does that do? Does that kind of lay out the way the towns would like to see the land used in the future? Is that kind of?
Yes, it did. It was a precursor, really, to these two committees that then worked. And they, with the help of consultants, really expanded on that West Side Master Plan and put together much more complete plans, looking at market analysis, business plans, et cetera. So they have assessments, appraised information from the consultants, so that when they go to the Navy to buy the properties, they have a very good idea of what it's worth. So that's a big help.
I guess the big question is, when is it actually going to happen? Do you have any sense of that?
Well, Middletown that property is very clean, and it would be a clean transfer. So they probably will go first. Newport has created a new undertaking to really study that area in relation to the North End and the hospital. So that may take a little longer, but they have really smart people working on that. Yeah. Portsmouth has a wonderful idea for how to trade those properties with the Navy by gaining the money, making a deal with the Navy to have the cleanup money up front, and then work with the developer to do the cleanup. Otherwise, none of these properties can transfer unless they have a determination of environmental.
So it's an EPA kind of issue, and
yes.
Yeah, I know that along Burma Road we had a lot of tank farms and old fuel oil tanks that are probably you got some remediation to do there or something like that.
Yes.
But I think it's interesting if people, as I mentioned, I went on your website and I recommend people go there and flip through the projects, because it's got a great descriptions all the way down to, you have a copy of the West Side Master Plan itself available, but it shows you the detail of planning that has to be done, and it probably had to be done, as you say, beforehand to try to prepare for when the Navy finally does release this thing. So I recommend people go to your website, take a look. You guys do a lot of stuff for our communities, and it's deeply appreciated. I think you need somebody like you guys from the outside to kind of pull things together, because everybody in New England seems to be kind of parochial about their own town, as we all are. And I think it helps having somebody facilitate this, like AIPC does.
Yeah, it's a neutral party.
Yeah, you live in Newport, right?
I do.
But I have to say that you were down at our 375th opening polar dive, and we were just talking. We almost tripped over each other getting out of the water. It was so cold. But thanks for all that, and thanks for supporting our 375th. You know.
Oh, I have to say that was one of the best organized projects that I've seen. I was so impressed with your work all throughout the year, and very sincerely.
I had a great committee. They did all the work, and
Yeah.
I was just like the guy that happened to be on, the upfront guy or something on some of the stuff. But it was good, and again, I appreciate what you do. How can people help you guys? How can our citizens? Well, one, they need to learn more about you. I think the best way is going to your website, asking you guys questions or whatever, making comments. There's a contact section on that website. How else can people help?
Well, I'd really like to know about individual concerns, individual or neighborhood concerns, whether it's roads or the environment, trees, that we could look at on an island-wide basis. Now, trees is a very minor idea, but these would be something that we could then look at, and that's why this board reorganization is going to be important. I'd love for people to get involved in this bikeway thing. I'd like for them to get involved in the reorganization by letting us know if they're interested in serving on the board. If they happen to have the skills that would contribute to the AIPC, and we can get those names to the councils for consideration for appointment.
Yeah, so you're really looking for kind of people with professional credentials of some kind that can provide a part that you might need. Okay, so they can certainly contact the council if they're interested in trying to get on the board, and they feel like they can contribute something. People can support you on this bikeway thing. How? Just by making comments, or?
Absolutely, they can come to the public meetings. I would say it would be extremely important for them to email, call, or write to the council members in Portsmouth. The other communities it's not, as we said, it's striping, but in Portsmouth it would be construction and rail with trails. So that is a larger project. So we'd really love to have them learn more about it. There's a section on it on our website, as you said. Call me if they'd like, or email me. My number is 845-9299, and talk about it. And if they think it's a good idea, let the council know, because they're the ones who make the decisions.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's several ways to do that. And again, I think people should start with your website. It looks great. It helps out a lot. I guess it just struck me that part of that transportation study that you did that include the roundabouts on West Main Road? And what is the status of any of this?
Well, the Middletown Council was not really interested in putting in the roundabouts, so they are the state is reconfiguring that 2-mile corner right now. They buried the utilities and...
Yeah, we had two, as I recall, I think.
Well, you have two on East Main by Clements.
Yeah, East Main, right.
And we are having RIDOT come down. We invited them to come down, speak to the council. So here's a public opportunity to learn more about it on the 24th of February.
Okay. Of course, the tolls are a big issue. We'd like to get, I'm hoping that our legislators have put a fix in that is amenable to everybody. But I think the idea that things are moving forward, even though you don't see them right away. I mean, what happened with the roundabouts, there was a lot of hoopla, and then sort of nothing happened. But I'm glad you're on the case, Tina.
Thank you.
And again, happy Valentine's Day, and thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. And this is Doug Smith signing off. See you next time.